installment number 3 in the review of microeconomic concepts for the midterm for the final. We're going to talk here about one last efficiency, and we talked before about allocative efficiency, about productive efficiency, and this time we're going to talk about distributive efficiency. The most important ones are going to be allocative efficiency. Allocative efficiency, as I said before, is used to differentiate between perfect competition and monopoly. Very important. Second one, less commonly seen on the AP, but also there. Another good thing about perfect competition is that for the marginal firm will be driven to a point where it will be producing at the minimum of the average total cost curve. So it's a cost minimization strategy, or at least a cost minimization objective that's achieved in perfect competition. Good. The last one, again, yet less commonly than the other two, is distributive efficiency. Allocative efficiency is about who gets that last unit of production. Where do we put the marginal resource? In terms of marginal resources, where the marginal benefit of price equals marginal cost. It's a good thing. In distributive efficiency, it's really about where equilibrium is, and can we or should we ever disturb equilibrium once we get there. A simple example would be things like a reservation at a ski resort and a reservation at a beach resort. And we have two different people who have these reservations for whatever reason they've been given them. And if the person who loves skiing and loves going outdoors and has great circulation down to the feet has a reservation for the beach where he or she will be overheated, and the other person has a reservation for skiing, and that's the person who gets frostbitten on the nose. Well, society overall will be better if those two exchange their tickets, their reservations. We can then alter the distribution of resources in society and make society better off. Alternatively, if we're at a situation where the skier has the reservation for the ski resort and the beach bum has the reservation for the beach, any exchange will diminish, will detract from total utility or welfare of society, and welfare society will decrease if we reallocate resources. So if we're at equilibrium, we are at a point, sometimes called Pareto optimality. We're at a point such that any other distribution or any change in distribution will only decrease welfare in society. And that's distributive efficiency. Less commonly seen on the exam. Now, one other thing we want to talk about, one of the other things we want to talk about is the structure of economic systems in society. Sometimes there might be a multiple choice question, maybe a couple, about how society is structured. Typically from the perspective of economics, we'll differentiate based on who owns the assets in a society, in an economy. So we can look at a market structure, and we can contrast that with socialism, or for you fans of Soviet Union, communism, something we don't see too commonly anymore. And the way we differentiate this is this has private ownership by individual entities. Socialism is collective ownership in common. And finally, communism is ownership by the state. Who owns the productive resources? Be more complicated than that. This typically, doesn't always have to be, typically that is differentiated based on who makes decisions in society. And here, we'd like to think this would be more decentralized, and this will be more centralized. And apart from any particular ideology, from an economic perspective, we'd like to think that it's very hard for any group of few individuals, either few or a group of few individuals, to actually know the preferences of large populations of people. And the market system is particularly efficient at letting individual consumers and suppliers, producers interact to determine equilibrium in many different markets. So this is very efficient at providing myriad different products to very different groups of people in a way that satisfies their desires. This one, well, certainly helps to centralize and devote resources to particular ends, but may not provide the same type of diverse production of diverse commodities to individuals. And that's how we as economists differentiate. Why do the curves look the way they do? Frequently a question asked maybe in a multiple choice context. So we look again. We say, well, demand curve. We know the demand curve looks like that. We have to go back and consider the experiment in Hershey's Kisses. And why was it that as people first started consuming Hershey's Kisses, there was a very large increase for most of us in the marginal benefit, the extra happiness people experienced when they went from scarcity of Kiss to some small but very interesting quantity of Kisses. And then as we moved further out into the experiment, we found that people were satiated in terms of their desire to have Hershey's Kisses, and they got to the point where actually didn't like them very much. But we see that there's this decrease in the marginal happiness people got from the consumption of the Kisses. And that's what we call diminishing marginal utility. And that's why this has this shape, and it's important to remember that for the exam. On the other hand, we have supply curves that are upward sloping. Why do they look like that? They look like that because really these are marginal cost curves for firms. And we find that ceteris paribus, important word, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, as we vary one resource, one unit, one factor, we start to increase production by putting more units of a factor into play, holding everything else constant. Well, the mix of factors is such that we don't get the same efficiency because we're holding the other factors constant. Consequently, it costs more. The amount that we induce, the marginal product decreases. The amount we get from every new unit of labor, every new hour of labor, might be positive, but it's always going to be decreasing because that laborer doesn't have the same quantity or ratio of machines that the previous laborer had, because we're holding machines constant, for example. So we find that productivity drops, and if we're paying wages that are constant, which sounds like a competitive market for labor, we're going to find that the cost of manufacturing the next unit goes up. So diminishing marginal product is the reason that we have an upward sloping supply curve. What are the determinants of supply or demand? Why do things, before we get there, just remember, you might want to also differentiate between a shift along a curve and a shift of the curve. The only time we really get a shift along the curve is if we have one of the other curve move. But sometimes you get a question in an AP type of environment which will ask you about a change in price. If it's only change in price, shift along a curve. Done with that. Next question is, what's the determinant of these curves? Why would a curve be here instead of there? What determines the location of a curve? And something we'll do that's a little different than what we did in class is we'll use some simple aids to memory. So for demand curves, we'll talk about tribe. Tribe. Consumer tastes would be related goods. I, income of consumers, more money, more purchases. B, the number of buyers, and E is expectations. What's going to happen in the future? And depending on how these change, the demand curve will shift in space. Next question, in a very analogous way, we ask, can we talk about some way to remember the determinants for shifts of supply? Shifts of supply, rotten. Rotten, well, resource costs. What are the costs of the inputs? Are they going up? Are they going down? is the wage level going up or down? And that will affect our profitability. I'll remind you to finish. Other goods prices, other goods, and I'll say that it's really related goods. Could we make more money producing something different with the same resources we have? If prices of another commodity going up and we could make that commodity too, ceteris paribus, that we could make more profits doing the other one, we might shift our production. Taxes and subsidies, some books will call this something separate. Typically I don't, but it spells better to have the T in here. This would really be resource costs. Taxes and subsidies, it's like a cost to the firm, but we make it separate, and now we have a nice word called rotten. This also is technology, the other T. Technology. Technology is very much determines the efficiency of our resources, and all things being equal, ceteris paribus, more efficient resources, constant cost for those resources, gives us more profits, or conversely less profits, and that shifts the supply curve. Also, we have expectations, somewhat similar, analogous to what we discussed for the consumer, or the demand curve. And last, the number of suppliers. And now we're done. That determines the determinants of the supply curve and what would make the supply curve shift in space, one side or the other.